Pollination Partners is a beekeeping business with around 850 hives, working in partnership with sheep, beef and dairy operations in Hawke's Bay. This symbiotic relationship between farmer and beekeeper provides Pollination Partners with tons of clover honey and propolis, while farmers get nitrogen-fixing clover pasture and a high-value feed.
The business was developed looking at the opportunity for clover honey crops. A lot of beekeepers were looking to get manuka crops and pulling the hives out of clover country, and that left a lot of farmers looking to pollinate their clover for the feed and nitrogen values that they provide. Farmers are becoming more aware of the need for bees due to the lack of the bees they're seeing at the moment and the diminishing of their clover crops. So, we have hives on some farms, they haven't seen a bee for 4 years. And they were desperate to get hives up, and now they've seen bees on their clover and the clover increasing in their pasture, which is quite beneficial for them. We don't pay farmers to be on the land. We work in a true partnership, a mutually beneficial partnership, where we provide them pollination of their clover. From that they get the feed value of the clover and they get the nitrogen fixing value from their clover as well. A lot of farms in this area would benefit 200 to 300 kilos per hectare per year of nitrogen fixing into their soils, and a lot of feed value. I understand that the feed value of clover pasture in New Zealand is worth $1.5 billion. Clover honey is actually rated the second best tasting honey in the world, and there's a big demand in the world at the moment for clover honey, with prices going from $4 up to $6 a kilo, whereas 4 or 5 years ago it was $1 a kilo. At this time of the year we're working through the hives doing a brood inspection, looking for American foul brood and any other disease issues. The clover hasn't quite come up yet and isn't yielding, so we're trying to make sure that they've got the food stores to get their strength up, so we're feeding them some sugar syrup. There's no feral bees left in New Zealand. Unfortunately, the varroa are spreading a lot of viruses, so there's a lot of different challenges such as deformed wing virus and a few others that have been spread. So in general, bee health is declining. We're seeing it in our bees. We're seeing a lot more trouble getting good fertilisation of our queens. There's a lack of pollen. There's a lot of different pollen sources out there that are disappearing. Bees need pollens for the amino acid to feed their young. It's their only source of amino acids, so a good varied range of pollens. Unfortunately with varroa, been in the country for 10 years now, the varroa have become resistant to the chemical treatments that we are using for them. Varroa chemicals have cost us 10 to 20% of our turnover in the business. Without those being effective, we're now looking to have to go back to more organic treatments, and with that we might have a fourfold increase in our labour to combat that. In our business we spend a lot of time concentrating on our genetic strains. We have artificially inseminated queens worth $1,500 from a Better Bees breeding project in Dunedin. We're actually shareholders of that. Hopefully one day we can develop bees that are resistant to varroa through hygiene, interrupting their breeding cycle, and we've seen some of that in our queens already, in those traits. We just need it to be more consistent, and I'm sure we'll get there and we'll beat varroa naturally. We collect propolis, medicinal grade propolis that's used in throat lozenges, and a range of products. Even some of the lower grade propolis is used for polishing. It's collected off deciduous trees in general, which there tend to be a lot around farms and around farmhouses. It's a mixture of resins and different things from within the tree. The bees fill up the gaps, they use it as a glue. They fill up gaps to keep the cold out. This is why we have little gaps here. If the gaps were bigger, they'd fill it with wax, but here they fill it with propolis. Propolis is an antibacterial product, antifungal. It's actually antiviral. There's a lot of research coming through now, and there's not many naturally occurring antivirals in the world. So it's a wonderful product, and we're getting about $200 a kilo.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.